notorious mobster Whitey Bulger.
I'm violent by design, kill at will. Lost in the soft void, need my fill. Drugs, murder, suicide.
Welcome to Diablos Digest, episode number 5. I'm your host, Jay Reason. I'm doing this one solo today. It came together pretty quickly because my guest, I was trying to get her on last week. She unfortunately wasn't feeling well, so we moved a few things around. She was able to jump on today. I was not able to get a hold of Yvonne in enough time to make this happen. So, I figured I'll just do this on my own. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm really excited to have our guest on. Been looking forward to getting her on and plugging the few projects that she's working on. Before we get into that, though, I got a new pre-order that just went up on Static Era. This one is the one that me and Yvonne plugged last week. This is the Laid to Rest Greatest Hits. The vinyl is already in stock, so if you pre-order this on staticera.com, staticerarecords.com, I should say, sorry, you won't be waiting too long. This is an exclusive variant from Days. Shout out to Lumpy and shout out to Laid to Rest for giving us this. Our vinyl looks sick. It's this crazy red with black and silver splatter. If you're watching this on the video, you can see me pulling this out. It's pretty sick. Those are moving pretty quickly. If you're in the area in Connecticut, save yourself the shipping, pick it up in person. Really excited. I know that one has been something that Lumpy and those guys have been working on for a little while now. Shout out to Rob at Brass City Merch who, really pushed to get this going and get the release out. I remember he talked about it and said, hey, man, do you want to get on board and do a variant? I said, of course. There was no question, especially get to work with them and to work with Lumpy. I'm really excited. We're working on a couple other things, some cool variants. So, yeah, keep your eyes open. Definitely lots of cool shit coming up at Static Era. As always, Diablos Digest is brought to you by Diablos Den, which is me and my brother, Danny Diablo. That's our main show. He's been super busy. He's got a bunch of new tracks out. You've heard a couple of them here at the beginning of the digest that I've been plugging. He just finished a bunch of stuff up at Milwaukee Metal Fest. Our next episode for Diablos Den, we'll do a little recap on that. I can't wait to hear about all his adventures over there. As always, make sure you're supporting Danny and all his stuff. Head over to DannyDiabloMerch.com and shout out to Force 5 Records, who are the sponsors of our overall show here. So yeah, it's been a pretty fun couple of weeks since. It's been a week since the last episode. So I want to thank our boy Noah for coming on. That was a lot of fun talking about Connecticut shit. Sometimes this is such a big scene, right? But when you have your friends on like that, it can make it seem so small, which is awesome. And I love that we got to do a little episode like that because, when me and Danny have guests on, we focus on kind of larger people, larger outside of our scene kind of people, which is pretty cool. So it's always nice to talk to like an up and coming band and especially somebody from your area, and just kind of get their perspective on things. So shout out again to Noah and Wreckage for jumping on. They've got a bunch of cool stuff happening. Make sure you check that one out. What else is going on, man? Fuck. It's been busy at the shop. I want to shout out everybody who's been stopping by. Everybody who's been checking out that Cinema Stare record that we just put out. It is doing super well. And I really, really want to thank all you guys for streaming that and getting behind that. I also want to shout out the Rolling Coffin record, which is Tim from VOD's project. That's been out for, almost 2 months now, and it's just crushing it. So again, I really want to thank you guys for getting behind the label and getting behind the releases. Man, I feel that support. What else? I'm trying to think if there's anything else before I get my guests on. You know what? I think that's it. I'll keep this intro pretty brief. I watched Spider-Man animated, the new one. It was fucking awesome. I'm going to get our guest on and see what she's been doing. So hang on one second and I'll be right back. All right. So I'm going to start this over. Me and Davin were mid conversation. I said, fuck, Davin, I forgot to hit recording. So we touched upon this huge thing. So my guest here is Davin from Marked for Life Radio. So I'm going to just jump right into this where we were. and go back to the beginning, because now I kind of have a little bit more context with you on a few things, and I think it'll make it sound a little bit better, actually. So, Davin, welcome to the show. I'm sorry for not hitting recording. That was my fucking thing. I was so busy prepping with you about it that I forgot to hit record when we started talking.
It's all right.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned about you was that you're from Maine, and we were talking a little bit about this pre-show, and I was talking about how far everything is in Maine. And one of my first exposures to really Maine and the distance of how far things was the band Outbreak. And you were telling me that you were friends with Chris Linkovich, shout out to Chris and Cruel Hand, with your first band Acadia. So tell me a little bit about your first band, getting involving like into the recording side and how you got into that process.
Yes. So I was saying, so I'm from a very small town called Topsom, Maine, which is in central Maine. I grew up on a road that was not even paved or named when I was a kid. It's called Rural Route 2. It now has a name. And Chris Linkovich lived actually down the road a bit. So this is all in high school. I'm like 16 years old. This is the birth of metalcore. I came from metal before hardcore, so it's very exciting for me. So I started a metalcore band, as one does, in 1998. And we were called Acadia. And Chris, who was maybe a couple years younger than me, was in a band called X Conscious Youth X.
Which is great. I literally cannot wait to text him about that.
Yeah, I have flyers kicking around here somewhere with both our names on it. But we used to play shows together, along with, as I was saying, the singer of American Nightmares, also from our small town. And he was in a high school band called Havier, which Chris and I actually both grew up seeing. Then we started our bands, American Nightmare started, and so all of us would play together all the time.
Which is so crazy, because when you think about it, and I had said this to you in our kind of like pre convo here, was that like, back then there was no internet, so everything had these kind of like micro things. And it's so interesting to hear that like in your scene you had all of this going on, which now like we were just talking about, Chris Linkovich has been highlighting a lot of that era with his new like Instagram thing, which is so cool, because like you said, I didn't even know Wes had a band that was pre-American Nightmare, especially because when you think of Maine, like I said, you think of kind of these small little sections and how far everything is. And shout out to Polyglot, which, like I had said to you before, that was one of the things, one of the bands that Linkovich really stresses was important. Did you ever get to see Polyglot, Devin, when you were going to shows and stuff back then?
I was obsessed with Polyglot. So they were like the local heroes. They kind of sounded like Satisfaction era Hatebreed.
I was going to say they were like your guys' Hatebreed for sure.
Oh God, they were so good. The singer had dreads, which like every singer in
shout out Tim from VOD.
And I was like, this is the hardest shit ever. Yeah, we were all obsessed. I knew every word. And actually, in the first episode of Mark for Life, I talk about this. Polyglot covered Integrity.
Oh, and no shit.
And they recorded it. I think it was on their demo. And so I had never heard Integrity, because back then, hardcore was so isolated. And as we were saying before we started recording, you could go to a record store if you could get to a record store, but then you still needed money to buy records.
Well, dude, and then if you had the money, you had to fucking hope that they had that record. Like I always use this example, right? Of like me and Yvonne, we were going to Trash America, and I always remember Yvonne was like, he specifically wanted Youth of Today Break Down the Walls. He's like, I want Youth of Today Break Down the Walls. So I was like, all right, fuck it. We're going to drive to Trash, which was like maybe 45 minutes from us. Yeah. I took my mom's car. Dude, we got there. They didn't have it. All they had was like a lost and found bootleg Youth of Today live. And like he bought that. So like, to your point, it's like, we were saying, how there's so many tools and so many things available to like a young kid, where like if you were going to start a band today and you're like, all right, I want to fucking sound like X, Y, and Z, you could deep dive on like all of these bands, learn all of the shit, and pretty much come out with something that sounds like pretty pro. Whereas like, my first band sounds a lot like your first band, where it's like you're kind of learning as you go, and not everything sounds so fucking good. At least that's the impression I'm getting from us talking.
Yeah. So to come back around to that, wait, I'll finish on the Integrity thing. Yeah. So I think if I'd seen the Integrity record, I wouldn't have even known what it was. If it had like, college font, I was like, oh, that's recognizably hardcore.
Right.
A competition where I could hear a bunch of bands at once. Funds are limited. I want to hear a lot of hardcore. So I went like a decade or more without knowing who Integrity was.
That's insane.
I fucking heard them, I was like, oh my God, they're covering Polyglot. I had no idea. Like, I can't believe the reach of Maine. I mean, I think Polyglot is sick, but apparently this band does too. And
Yo, that's crazy.
we're like, dude, what are you talking about? And I was like, I'm talking about Polyglot, the cover you are hearing. And they were just like, yo, this is Integrity. And I was like, oh my God. I had no idea. You know, I know everything to it.
Was
But,
that, so we were saying before, like, was that from when, were you exposed more to stuff when, like, obviously you grew up in Maine, which was something we were talking about. Was that something you were more exposed to when you got to Philly, right? Was Philly your next move?
no, I moved all over. I went from Maine, I went to Eugene, Oregon, I went to Richmond, Virginia, then I went to Denver, then I went to Philly.
Oh yeah, so you're very traveled.
Yeah.
When you were going to, like, say from Maine to like a Eugene, Oregon, because I remember going to Eugene when I tagged around with Hatebreed. That was a pretty hip town. Like, was that something music related, or were you just out there doing your thing? Like, what was the was it some
I'm a socially conscious leftist sort of person, and that was kind of like a hotbed of activism at the time.
cool?
My friends from Maine had moved there, and I had been traveling for a few months, and I was like, man, I'm gonna go to Eugene and see if they want to go get a place in California with me. And I got off the bus and I was just like up a Greyhound, and I was like, you know, I'm tired. I'll just live here. It looks nice.
That's awesome. Were you doing any music at this time?
No, I started booking shows there. There wasn't a hardcore scene. They had a really huge crust scene and they had a punk scene, but there was no hardcore. So I started booking like pretty much right away. And because there was no hardcore scene, I would make flyers and I would bike around, and any alt person at all I would see, I'd be like, hey, check it out, hardcore show, you should come. And
Yeah, that's awesome.
It failed miserably.
My only exposure, like I said, to Eugene, Oregon was in 2002. Hatebreed had they were doing day offs, like, you know, all their off dates, and one of them was in Eugene, Oregon with, I want to say Glassjaw. Yeah, one of them. And I just remember this show it wasn't sparsely attended, but it was just like, you know, for that era, Hatebreed and Glassjaw would have been sold out kind of anywhere else. And I remember thinking like, that's kind of weird, but everybody was so fucking cool. That, like I said, till this day, it made an impression on me. So Davin, you're booking shows in Eugene, and then where do we go? Where does the journey go from there?
Yeah, so yeah, my high school band Acadia, we toured in the year 2000. We break up in the year 2000 after a fist fight. I moved to also kind of funny. We made it to New York City. I booked the whole fucking tour. You know, I'm 17 years old. I booked this tour, and I'm doing it by telephone. You know, people would be like, hey, call so-and-so in this state, and they should be able to hook you up. And then I had to describe the band.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we get a show in New York City, and it's with Poison the Well. And you know, we show up. I feel like it was in Manhattan. I don't really know. You know, we're from Maine, so we're like, wow, look at the things. I walk in and I'm like, hey, what's up? We're Acadia from Maine. And they're like, you're not on the show.
Oh no.
We're not. And so we just like loaded in. They were like, okay, I guess you can play. But like, somebody had just told us we were on a show we were not on. And that was common in that era. But yeah, anyway, so then I moved to
well, you like you said, pre-internet, there's no way to fucking confirm any of these things. I remember like when we would tour, we would just kind of get as close to like Main Street as possible, and then get to a payphone, and you would call the promoter and then hope like his mom or someone picked up, and they would have left directions, or they could give you some kind of information. Like I said, man, like, yo, shit's just so spoiled now in comparison to then, where you're like a hair, it's just like a hair above homelessness, you know, like you're kind of just out there looking for shit in hardcore land back touring in 98, 99.
Yeah, it was crazy times. But yeah, so from there I went to Eugene, tried to book shows. It wasn't working. And I got on a Greyhound. I went back to Maine to visit my dad, and I just never went back. I left my stuff. I was like, whatever, I can't do this. Then I moved to Richmond, Virginia. What was I doing there? I think I was just hanging out and going to shows.
Good place to hang out. Really great scene, of course.
Yeah, Richmond's so fun. And then I moved to Philly, and in Philly is where I started my band Kingdom.
Yeah, I want to talk about Kingdom. So when you get to Philly, Davin, do you have in your mind, do you want to start a band, or how does that come together?
Yeah, definitely. So I moved to Philly, and I knew I wanted to start like a vegan straight edge band that was like very outspoken and political.
That's hard. I love that.
Yeah, because we you know, I was always going to shows, even when I wasn't playing. I was very active, and it was kind of like we were in this weird moment. It was 2006, and there just like weren't. There was kind of like a lull in the super political bands and vegan straight edge bands. We're like, well, there's got to be one. You need the band that talks long winded between every song. And we were like, fuck it. I mean, I guess we can do it. We can play music. Let's go. And so we were like very intentional about what we were going to do. And we were like, we're going to tour all the time because we wanted to.
That's
So,
sick.
We put it together with a friend from Richmond, and some folks, some of the dudes from Black My Heart came down. None of us were from Philly. We were all from everywhere else. We moved to Philly, and then we did a 6-song demo, which is absolute dog shit. It's so bad.
Did you did you guys record that on your own, or did you go to a studio and do that?
We recorded with some friends in Philly. I wouldn't blame the recording. It was definitely just our ability or lack thereof at the time.
Understood.
Yeah, but bad demo aside, we played our first show, and then we kept going for 60 days after. Our first tour was 2 months long.
Holy fuck. Like just US, like just
US, yeah. We just went for it. And
dog, that's crazy.
Had this, we sound like a joke now, but it was
no, it's just funny because like 2006, for those who don't remember, and I'll tell you, I vividly remember because this is like the height of my band touring, was that gas was so fucking expensive, like in 2006, 2007, that like it's crazy that you could tour that much, only because I could imagine that like, it was very difficult to really make, I mean, it's still difficult to make money in music in touring and stuff. So man, just to hear you guys doing that amount of shows back then must have taken a lot to do that.
Well, we bought an airport shuttle bus and converted it to run off used vegetable oil.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so like our tours ended up being super chaotic because like we constantly had to go to Chinese restaurants and had to be like, "Hi, can we have your old oil?" And they like wouldn't understand. And we were just like constantly hunting for oil, filtering it. We filtered it by hand. And then sometimes we'd get like falafel bits in the pipes or something, and the whole bus would shut down. We were just
So I've actually never talked to anybody who rented those vans or had a van like that. Like I said, I remember those popping up a lot in that era. And I have so many questions. So please tell me, what's your like most memorable interaction asking for vegetable oil? Because that's just got to be one of the most, I can't even imagine the interaction, because again, most of these places are probably like, what are you asking for? Why do you want that? And then like, can you just walk me through the one that sticks out in your head the most when you mentioned the vegetable oil to people?
Yeah, I think so. I was always the one to do it because I'm really friendly. Kind of things. I'd be like, "Hi, I have a bus that runs up," and typically the places we would go, people were speaking English as a second language, and I talk really fast, and I'm nervous because it's weird. And so they would just look at me, and I'd be like, "Do you have old oil? Can I have it?" But I remember one time, I don't know what restaurant we went to, but I did the "Do you have old oil you are throwing away? Can I have it?" And they were like, yeah, it's in the back. And we went, and it was barrels, and we were like, "Oh my God, it's Christmas, barrels of oil." It open, and I think it was animal fat, and they're like dead bugs in it.
Oh, that's disgusting.
Like, oh no, you can't use that. So
yeah, because it's got to be. And so when you guys go to convert this the shuttle thing, did you do it yourselves, or did you hire a company to do that?
Our guitar player at the time was really into cars, and he was like, "I want to learn to do this myself."
Yo, that's awesome.
Trial and error process with a lot of error, including like he used it was like a boat filter, like a marine filter, to filter out the food particles, which was fine until we got off the coasts on tour. So we'd be like somewhere square in the middle, and we'd be like, "Okay, it's been this many miles, we got to replace the filter." Well, there's no place selling marine filters.
Oh, right, because you're just like in the middle of land, nowhere.
Fucked. Like it was rough, and like we were constantly moving. It was a 55-gallon drum of oil that we had inside the bus.
And like, how long would that, just because again, I have no idea. So how many miles, like how long could you go on like, I guess what would be considered a full tank of vegetable oil? Like how far could that get you?
I'm a perpetual passenger because I never learned how to drive. So I don't remember. I just know that I'd hop out and be like, "Okay, I'll go get us oil."
Okay. But so like, yeah, like, I mean, dude, that's just crazy. Cause like I said, touring is already so hard. It's hard enough. And then you add that into the equation, but having a mechanic in the band is like a fucking huge, like almost like a huge advantage in a tour. Cause if anything happens, at least there's someone who's kind of knowledgeable who can maybe fix like, the minor things, which is pretty cool.
The,
Oh, go ahead.
the worst part about it was that, we had the 55-gallon barrel inside, but it would heat up because it was, being used as fuel, and the top of it was open. So it smelled.
I was just going to say.
I remember we played a show in Detroit. We're already like a vegan band. And so people are like, man, that vegan smells like they smell gross. And I was like, oh man.
Oh man, that's fucking brutal. But
in this world, I didn't want to stink.
you know what though? It at the time, it's like it shows and stuff. Everybody smells pretty raunchy, especially in the summer. So I think you're fine. So Kingdom, does that start in 2009?
2006.
2006. Okay, sorry, I had my notes were a little off. And then you do this demo, and then you end up on Eulogy, or did you do something first with
Yeah, we did the demo, then we signed to New Age Records, and we did which had a Reagan Youth cover, which is the coolest part about that 7-inch.
And New Age is a fucking awesome label. What was that like for you joining up with them? Like, especially, like I said, you're probably super familiar with their catalog at this point. So how did that come together, and were you really excited to put something out?
Yeah, they contacted us, and I was like, oh, good. But yes, obviously we want to do this. And then they wanted to do the 7-inch, and it was so crazy because it was in 2008. And we were already like, oh my God, like now we're on New Age Records, like we're doing the damn thing. This is so sick. And then I get an email being like, hello, Kingdom. And the 7-inch isn't out. So all we have is a 5-song demo that is awful. And there's a tour in Europe that some band from the US, I don't remember who, was going to play, and they dropped. Would you like to come? All you have to do is buy your tickets. Here are the dates. And it's like over a month in Europe.
Oh, sick. Yeah.
Yes, obviously. So we end up on this terrible demo and a forthcoming 4-song 7-inch, one of which is a cover, going to Europe, which, as you probably know, they make you play like 45-minute sets.
Oh yeah, we only got to go once, and we were like the opener on that, and yeah, we had to play for like 30 minutes, and it was during the time we did our sellout record. So like it was extra difficult because we had to like really make the hardcore songs stretch out. So it was difficult. But yeah, I do just feel fortunate. I'm sure you do as well, as that like being able to tour over there at that time was so fucking cool. And from what I've heard, very different than what it's like now. So I'm sure you had a great time going over there, especially like I would feel like a band like Kingdom probably went over super well there. Is that right?
We did, yeah. Especially in that era, people were, like I said, we came at a time where there was like a lull in politics and veganism, and there weren't a lot of women in bands. So we faced a lot of hostility in the US, but Europe, they're in a different mindset. So, and there were maybe like a larger demographic of people who were open to vegan and political bands.
And they always seem they're like, it always seems like they're way more appreciative to have a band there, even if they don't necessarily like the style per se. They're excited to have you there. Whereas like, I think a lot of times here we take so many things for granted because we're like, it's just another band or another show. Whereas over there, they really try to make it count.
Yeah.
So how long? So you guys go on tour in Europe. How long is that first tour?
Like a month. And we toured on our, the songs we had, and then we did an equal number of covers to make our. And so people would say things, they're very blunt there. They'd come and be like, I like your band. Come back when you know more of your own songs.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't say some of the words that they would say to us, but you can imagine after the record they did where they would say, we like you, we like your band, but this is, and you can imagine the expletives that they would then entail.
Yes.
But you know what? It's all charming at the end of the day. And like I said, I have so many great memories from going there, and I just feel lucky that we were able to go. So how do you guys, so you go from New Age, right? New Age puts this out, and then you end up connected to John Wiley.
Yeah. So I don't remember how the hell that happened, but like we were touring a lot. Like we toured our asses off. We went to Europe in 2008, and we just kept doing full US tour after full US tour. I booked them all. Like,
who were some of the bands that you went out with?
We would go out by ourselves sometimes, or we do like different runs with different people, but we went out with Furious Styles.
Oh, sick. Yep.
We went out with Lewd Acts. We went out with a band from PA called Barricade. I'm trying to think of who the fuck else. A band from Florida called Battle. Sometimes they
but
were
you definitely, you guys definitely did your thing, which is pretty impressive because, like you said, there's at the time not that many bands like that. And here you guys are just being like, yo, fuck it, we're going for it and doing it.
I think we did like 7 full US tours, and then we ended up touring Europe 4 times. We toured Russia twice.
That's crazy, dude. Yeah, like I see, I'm glad that we got to talk a little bit pre-game too, because I had no idea. When I was doing my research on you, it's so hard to find stuff, especially of like the bands from our era, which is like pre-internet stuff. So it's like I was kind of going in blind on this, and I'm super happy that you're pulling the curtain back and exposing a lot of these stories. Because yeah, it is super cool that you've done all that stuff. What was going to Russia like?
Russia Russia was fucking crazy. But wait, on the eulogy thing, I don't know how it happened, but we ended up getting like this. I think it was just because we were grinding so hard.
And yeah, and I mean, John, like, I know people have their opinions, whatever, but I've known John for years. And he was definitely a dude who had his ear to the streets, like he knew about shit. And like I said, he had during the moment you guys were on, I mean, they were one of the top dogs for sure.
It was, yeah, and we got a 3-record deal, and we were like, oh shit, let's fucking go.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
To you, because like I said, like there weren't a lot of women in bands at the time, and I was like very not wanting my gender to be any sort of focus in the band. So like we wrote into the contract that they weren't allowed to mention the gender of any members of the band. Any photos they took had to be approved by us. And he was like super, super cool about it, which I feel like at that time, was like surprised a lot of people.
Well, especially too, like to your point, where at that era, it's like you have, I can vividly remember certain female like heavy metal artists that they're like, okay, we're putting you on the cover, or you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure all the same ones I'm talking about. So it is cool that you were able to kind of get that in. And again, shout out to John for doing that and being cool about it, because, a lot of labels would have probably said to the band, oh yeah, sure, we got you. And then when the opportunity comes to put like 10 sexy metal chicks or whatever they're calling it, and then he'd be like, here's this picture. So that is cool.
Yeah.
So a lot of respect to John for that.
Absolutely.
Then tell me a little bit more about, does Kingdom, from when you go on eulogy, how long does that last?
So we did a full length, but so we came in at a weird time. We put out our first full length, which was called The Rage That Guides, I think. Good Lord. If I remember. But it was right at the time where everybody stopped buying CDs.
Yeah. That was like right when, so I used to do a label with Josta called Stillborn, and very vividly remember that was like the fucking end of an era. Cause, again, similar to like what John was able to do, you were able to develop a band, and not only develop a band, but you were able to ship product to so many stores. And there were so many programs available to expose, bands like, like a new band like Kingdom, or on our labels, a Full Blown Chaos or Sworn Enemy, to people that, maybe wouldn't have been exposed to those things in a store. So that is pretty cool.
Yeah. So our CD came out, and it was like that month that people stopped buying for whatever reason. But then there weren't platforms like Spotify or something.
Yeah, it was just iTunes, and a lot of people still weren't really sure, like, what the fuck am I buying?
It just kind of like landed with a thud. And then we still had a 2-record deal with like a fair amount of money behind it, honestly. And I was like, I feel bad, I don't want to like, milk, I'm just trying to like do, play hardcore with my friends, and like, I'm not trying to like get anything out of him. So I was like, hey, we were kind of like, we just want to be a more DIY band. Like we started doing bigger tours. And we didn't like them. We were having less and less fun, like the bigger we were getting. And we were just like, staying in hotels sucks. I mean, it's like nice to be comfortable and to have water, but at the same time, like I spent all my time with you fools. Like I want to stay. I want them to take us to like the swimming hole. I want dinner, like we missed.
Yeah, you're trying to live on tour. You're trying to like get in there and live this everyone's part of their world.
Yeah, it sucked to like, we're in Poland, but we're watching, like American TV, and we're just with the same 4 people. Like, I don't even want to hear them breathe at this point. Right. So I was like isolating and not that fun. We were like, yeah, we want to go more DIY. I was like, I don't want to milk this contract. Like, so I emailed John, and I was like, hey, is there any way that we could just get out of the contract, just kind of like shake hands and walk away? I think we want to do vinyl. We want to like do more DIY tours. And he was like, yes, absolutely. because I'm sure he didn't want to be on the hook for all this, when nobody's buying CDs.
Oh yeah, and back then, like I said, I mean, I remember those deals, and I can very vividly remember, without you giving me numbers, I can only imagine what LP 2 and 3 would have looked like for him. So I'm sure, like you said, he was probably like, yeah, please, it's all good.
He was there, handshake and thank you and goodbye. And then we
Yeah.
put 7-inch on a friend's label, and that was our last 7-inch, which was actually pretty good.
Let's talk about Russia. So yeah, Davin, tell me a little bit about Russia, because that to me is so interesting.
Yeah, so we went twice. We really loved touring.
Did you book that yourselves, or how did that come together?
No, I would book our US tours, but when it came to Europe, yeah, we would deal with a booking agency. They were like DIY booking agencies. And then we had a friend named Yaki, and a lot of people went through. He had a short-lived booking agency, and he was also a driver from Budapest. And he would get you like the craziest shows, like, Eastern Europe in this huge squat that was somehow run by hardcore kids. And you'd be staying in this, like, they'd have a whole lair for you to sleep in. And it felt like Neverland or something. And so Yaki was like, do you want to go to Russia? We were like, fuck yeah, we want to go to Russia. So,
well, and that's awesome, because it just sounds like, you wanted to be exposed to as many places as possible, which I think that's one of the coolest things that hardcore can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was, yeah, we definitely benefited more than the people. It was incredible. Actually, we went to this place called Chernihiv, Ukraine. We were the first American hardcore band to ever play there. It was like,
no shit.
Yeah, and it was cool. There were like 13-year-olds X'd up at it. It was wild. But so the first time we went to Russia, we were there for, I think we just did 3 days. We did Petrozavodsk, which is like a smaller city kind of up north, which great place. I still have friends from there. And then and Moscow and St. Petersburg. And so we just did kind of like a town that really wanted us, and they knew every word to all of our songs. They brought us presents. I mean, it was like, and it's just this totally.
It was like the Beatles.
Yeah, it was like, yeah, it was pretty wild. But they were cool, like super down hardcore kids was like bouncing off the ceilings and stuff.
That's so sick.
Moscow, I want to say that was the one we played. We were there with like Walls of Jericho. I don't remember who else, but I think it was, yeah, our first time in Moscow, and it was this huge venue. And they brought us in the back to the green room. And then they said, the Nazis are here. You have to stay here. And they locked us and Walls of Jericho in the back room.
What the fuck?
And put a guard in front of it while they all went out to fight Nazis. Because in Russia, especially at that time, there's a huge neo-Nazi movement, and they particularly target hardcore shows and hardcore kids because they know typically we're anti-fascist. So this happened a lot to us in Eastern Europe and particularly Russia. But this one was crazy because if you've seen the movie Green Room.
Yeah, I have. That's the first thing I pictured when you said that, was what I pictured in my head, was like that movie.
It was chilling because not only do they actually talk about hardcore in like a pretty correct way in that movie, but I was like, I lived this.
You're like, did somebody sell the screen rights to the story? Shout out to Walls of Jericho too. Actually, that's who we went over to Europe with, and their whole team and was just fucking awesome. And the shows that we got to do with them and the crowd they bring are so sick. Yeah, super cool band.
That shit was like, I mean, not a show. That was like a concert. You know what I mean? Like, it was a very.
No, dog. Like, we went, it was, the lineup, like, every time I think about it, I'm still just like, how is this even real? It was Sick of It All headlined with Madball, Walls of Jericho, Comeback Kid, and Terror.
Okay.
So yeah. I was just like, I mean, dude, I sat there, like, I'm like you. I just, I'm a kid who was like, fuck, I never thought we'd go anywhere, let alone like in Europe with these guys. I would just sit there on the side of the stage and be like, what the fuck? Like, I'm like, I can't believe like hardcore brought me here, which is cool. And I think that like when I talk to a lot of people like our age, that's like the general thing is like, it seems to be like, that I don't want to sound like whatever, but it's like just a little bit more like, you're just more excited, whereas like sometimes the younger kids will come off a little more entitled, like, yeah, I should be on this tour. Yeah. Whereas like I always felt like I was like, what the fuck am I doing here? Yeah. Like I still sometimes never feel like I belong in a lot of those situations, Yeah,
it was really cool we did the show in St. Petersburg with Walls of Jericho as well. But it was crazy when we were locked in the green room and the Nazis were attacking. Everybody, people's personalities just go wild in a situation like that. We're like in a windowless room. I'm claustrophobic. So I'm like, I need to get out of here. I don't want to be in here. Oh my God, what's happening out there? I'm like not, I'm like I'm like an anxious Jewish woman from the East Coast. Like, one would expect. And then like our bass player's like this giant dude. He's like, you gotta let me out. Let me at the Nazis. Give me the Nazis. And then Candace from Walls of Jericho is like really, really ripped. She's super.
Oh yeah.
Ups doing handstands against a wall while her bandmate is punching her in the abs. She's just like, while I'm freaking out, our bass player's like, let me fight Nazis. She's just getting punched and going, huh.
And you're like, what the fuck is happening here?
Insane. Like, is this how he dies? So why is everyone so chill?
So you got to tell me, how do we get out of this situation? How does this get resolved?
They just like unlock the door and then the show happens.
That's fucking
like, okay. And then afterwards, I don't speak Russian, so I was really impressed when people, are bilingual or multilingual. But sometimes, they can't say much. So I remember at the show, this guy came up to me, he grabbed me and smiled, and I smiled back, and he goes, hardcore is number one. And I was like, yes, hardcore is number one. Agreed.
That's awesome. How much longer did Kingdom go on from, like, it sounds like you're super active at this point. Like, how does this wind down? Because again, it sounds like you have everything going for yourselves. You guys are doing successful European runs. You get out of your record deal to get like your masters and stuff back, which anyone who's listened to the show knows that I'm a big supporter of that. So how does this like wind down like for you?
So we keep touring, we keep grinding, but we're getting really bored. Because it's like a weird thing for so many years. And I think about bands, like Hatebreed, like think of any long-term band. Like we were only a band for 6 years, and like 5 years in, 5.5 years in, I'm like, I wrote this song so long ago, which really it wasn't. And I'm like, I almost felt like locked in a moment.
Right.
All these things I cared about. I mean, I still care because of political things, but I was like, I want to do something else. And when you're touring through the same place over and over, you're seeing people's lives progress and change. But you're just like, I'm still playing the song I wrote 5 years ago.
Right.
It starts to feel weird, like you're in the frozen moment where you can't change as a person. So we're all kind of feeling like that because we really don't do anything else. There was a year we toured 9 months out of the year.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and we would do these brutally long tours. So the last tour we were in Europe for 2 months. The last one was 6 weeks, followed by 14 days in Europe.
Yo,
and
that's
14 days in Russia. It was
that's fucking crazy.
Longest. I said, what's the longest an American band has ever toured Russia? And they were like, oh, you don't want to do more than 3 or 4 days. And I said, no, what's the most you can? And I was small towns, every city, we want to do it. And they were like, oh, okay, if you want to.
And what were those shows? Like, was there kids at the, like, or you, because obviously you're creating kind of like in a lot of ways, almost creating a scene on the fly right there, right? So what are those shows like for you guys?
They have their own hardcore scene. They have tons of bands. I mean, it's kind of reminds me a bit of Topsom, where I grew up, Maine, where it's like an isolated small place where people don't have access to a lot of other things. And hardcore becomes the most important thing. And then when a band from another country comes, especially to a small town in Russia, it just didn't happen.
Right.
It was a huge fucking deal. But we had an abysmal time. It was the worst thing I've ever done. I mean, sending love to the people I know there, but like we did not have a good time. We also, the first time we toured by van, but we were stopped maybe every, I don't even know, hour by cops that would shake us down for bribes.
Oh, fuck.
We were just like hemorrhaging money there. And so the second time we toured by train, which was, oh my God, the Russian trains are crazy. But also, in Russia, especially going through small towns, there's like a very strong anti-American sentiment. And there's also a really strong, like fascist, neo-Nazi, strain through the country. And so they had told us, like, you have to hide that you're American, tell people you're Australian or you're British if they ask. We were like, oh. And we had a situation where I was like cornered on a train by myself. And then I was almost kidnapped off the train. I mean, we had so much crazy shit happened that every single day in these towns, somebody be like, I'm going to the bathroom. And then we'd be like, yo, where's Paige? Where's, so-and-so? And then they'd come back like 25 minutes later with a wild look in their eyes and be like, these guys just had me against a wall. They were threatening me in Russia. And people were threatening to kill us constantly.
Yeah. At that point, it's not it stops being fun because you're like, all right, dude, this is like a hardcore punk rock thing, not like
People, well, they're like not, they're just people from the town, like crazy stuff would happen. But then there were also fascists that would try to infiltrate, get pictures of our faces, get us to sign things so they had our names. And they were targeting it. Yeah. So at a lot of the shows on that tour in the smaller places, the fascists were so targeting, like so focused on hardcore that the people at our shows would wear like Halloween masks and ski masks because if there were any pictures of the shows, they didn't want their faces shown.
that's
So
crazy. And are you guys traveling with your gear? Like, how would that work at the like? Would you rent gear there, or would you come with?
it's crazy. So we had our gear and we would get off a train and we were there in the winter. So
I'm just picturing Rocky 4 for anyone else who's listening. Like,
so we get off this train, like we were on one train, it was 24 hours on a train, and then we get off at our stop, and then we're in this, blizzard, and we just step off and we're like on a platform in the middle of a field, and we're like, and then over the horizon, we're like, is that the shape of a hardcore kid? Yeah, that looks like a windbreaker. And then they come trudging down through the snow. A lot of times they wouldn't speak English. They would just grab a bass, grab a drum, and turn and walk. And we would just follow them through the snow.
that's fucking crazy, dude. Like I said, I'm literally just picturing like you guys being dropped off in like the part in Rocky 4 where the car is following him as he's training, like, or some kind of craziness.
It was so wild. And then like through that 14 days, for whatever reason, we had like very limited access to food. Like our drummer lost like 20 pounds in 14 days.
Holy shit.
Yeah, we would try to leave the venue and they would bring us back. And we were just like really hungry and people were threatening to kill us all the time. Fascists were after us. Like I got grabbed by the cops at one time. Like it was madness. And then at some point in there, I was like, yo, I don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, me neither. And we just literally played a last show in Russia, like super unceremonious. I'll remember it. Like, I don't care. Not everything has to be a big fucking deal. You know what? The band ended, let's go. And I wanted to go to college. So got back and started doing that.
Davin, I hope one day that you write a book about all of these things, because I have to tell you that this is just, it's pretty fucking crazy. Like you said, I mean, dude, if they can make a movie out of Green Room, I've got to imagine that there is something you could definitely write a few chapters about just the fucking antics of going over there. I want to touch on a couple other things because I feel like I could talk to you for hours about just everything. So I want to go over a few other things, because after Kingdom, you start another band. Tell me about starting this band. This is it's called Eaten Alive, right?
Yeah, Eaten Alive.
So the Eaten Alive, I was exposed to a little bit more because again, it was more like a little more current. So I had seen and again, shout out to Yvonne, who it's my best friend. He was the first to turn me on your band, and I was like, yo, this is fucking sick. I was for a couple of years working in the city and was just like out of it, dude. So like there's like an era of just totally missed bands, like where I just was just not involved because of work and life. And then again, shout out to Yvonne for showing me new stuff. And one of the bands was Eaten Alive, because I really like that kind of style of hardcore. Tell me about starting this. So again, you go from doing Kingdom, which you're like grinding it out there. This is fucking everything, pretty brutal, it sounds like. And you're like, fuck it, let me just start another band. Tell me about this.
So literally, yeah. Russia, yeah, I was like, we were over it. I read a lot, and I'm wanted to go like read with other people, and I was like, is that what college is? And I was like, so I started community college. I was like, what, are you fucking kidding me? This is awesome. You guys just read and talk about ideas. Why didn't anyone tell me? So I started college at 30 when Kingdom broke up. And so then I didn't even know what the different degrees were. I'm the first in my family to go. So I started community college, and they were like, you should go get a bachelor's. And I was like, sure. What is that? And so I ended up getting, 4-year degree. And then while I was doing that, some of my best friends from Philly, one of my best friends, Max, was like, yo, Bernard, I've got this band. I've got this demo. Do you want to sing? And I hadn't even heard it. I was like, it's your band? Fuck yeah, dude. And he was in like Freight Train. He was in Heidnik. He was in some other stuff. Old Philly dude, super great person. I was like, yes, I'm in. Then he sent me the tracks, and I was like, oh shit, this is good.
Yeah, it is super good. And then you guys end up doing a record on Fast Break, which is a super cool label. They was the home of Wisdom in Chains. Tell me about linking up with those guys and that process, because again, pretty pretty cool to start a band that sounds like that and then get to be on a cool label off the rip.
We were playing like super fast hardcore. It was like straight up hardcore with some blasts. And it was cool because we were bringing in hardcore people, but like a lot of people who would like, Napalm Death would like us. So we had like a lot of crossover, playing all sorts of different type of shows. And it was really fun, low key, not trying to tour, barely left the city. We'd be like, we're going to New Jersey.
Yeah.
And it was with a bunch of friends and no pressure. So we had a fucking blast. And yeah, Fast Break approached us and wanted to do the full length. And we were like, fuck yeah, dude. And then, yeah, everything was going really well. We wrote the full length, we recorded it, and we played This Is Hardcore. And we were going to tour Europe with Wisdom in Chains the following spring. And then Max actually passed away very suddenly.
I didn't actually know that. I'm sorry.
And we just broke up the band because, it was a band.
Yeah, no, you can't. After that, I'm sure it's probably very difficult. But if we could keep talking about it for a second, you guys got to play This Is Hardcore, so shout out to Joe. What was that like? And I've seen you guys, you've played, did you guys play the church too, right?
We didn't.
Oh, okay. So I saw you do a video though with drawing a blank.
Oh, in a crowd. I did guest vocal.
Right. Okay, that's what I was getting confused with. So apologies to my listeners and to you, Davin, for getting my notes confused here. I thought that you guys had played the church. Tell me about playing This Is Hardcore though. How was that like for you, especially like you moved to this city and then get to play there? What was that like?
I moved from the city and then 16 years later, I'm basically like, I consider myself a Philadelphian, and then I'm like, well, I guess I'm also a Mainer, but I lived in both about an equal amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, dude, for what it's worth, as an outsider, I always thought you were from Maine, a Maine to Philly person. So
thank you.
if that's what you're repping for, dude, it's working, because that's what I bought. So
Philadelphia is my chosen home. I love Philly so much. So it was great. Yeah, we got to open on Friday. They always have a Philly band open on Friday. They asked us. And it was just, we were so excited. We wanted to be, we had all these ideas. We're like, we're going to roll out a red carpet and walk down. That's it, like we're royalty. And then we're like, wait, we only have a 15-minute set. And we had even talked about, what if we don't play? What if we just take it to the stage and that's it? Let's be the stupidest band ever. Of course, we didn't do that. We were very, very excited. But the day before, I got the flu.
Oh, fuck.
Voice, and we almost had to drop. But my voice came back a little bit the next day. I was like, I'll do my best. And so we played the set, and as soon as it was over, I went to the hospital. I was sick. So like, if you ever see the video, the last song, I'm dying and my voice starts going like, what's happening? Yeah, I went to the hospital twice that weekend. I was fucked up. But
dude, I'm definitely, not to embarrass you, I'm gonna have to watch that, only because I cannot picture it. Because like I said, the Eaten Alive stuff I've ever heard was just so chaotic and just so fast and abrasive that I can't picture you doing this and feel like I guess as a vocalist, I can only imagine how hard it would be to do a set like that when you're feeling like shit, Well,
I remember after the set, I was like, oh my God, I barely moved around. Like, this fucking sucked, because I'm usually very energetic. And then I saw the video, I was like, no wonder I felt so bad after. I never what the hell? But that stage is so big too. We're used to playing small stages. When you get on a big stage like that, and you're like, especially a vocalist, and you're used to taking up a lot of space, you start to feel like an ice skater, where it's like, okay, I got to make all the laps. I got to.
Yeah, you're going like back, and especially like you said, if you're more like an intimate crowd person, that the big stage is definitely like a harder thing. And it can almost sometimes become a little self-conscious, like, because you're almost like, fuck, all these people are looking at me for, it kind of like takes you out for a second. I want to talk quickly about the main reason I wanted to have you on was for this really cool thing that you're doing called Marked for Life Radio. So tell me about that idea coming together, Dav, because I thought that was so cool. What made you start that, and like, how did that come together? Because I thought it was a really cool idea and a great way to expose new bands.
Yeah, thanks. So it was a pandemic project. It was weird, like, I didn't realize until the pandemic, and it felt silly to talk about them because people were like, dying. Be like, I miss hardcore so much I could cry, But I started going to shows when I was 12, and then all of a sudden it's just gone. And it was the first time since then.
Oh, listen, dude, I opened a record store during the pandemic. I mean, like I said, I talk about this at in every episode. Like you, I started going to shows. My brother took me at 16. So this was all I do. Like, I still go to 2-3 shows a week, dude. So it's like when it was gone, I was like, wait, what the fuck am I gonna do now? Like, I totally get that.
Yeah, I was like, and it was just like, oh my God, there's like a hole in my soul. Like, I need to small talk about bands. Like, I didn't know that that was a requirement for life for me, but apparently. So I did, what everyone does. And I was like, let me go through every single thing in my house and see what I own because I have nothing else to do. And I found a box of old cassette tapes. And in there, I found this unmarked tape. And I was like, oh, I wonder what's on this. And I put it in my little boombox. And it was the old hardcore radio show that I grew up listening to as a teenager. And it was from WUNH. It was like a college radio show
Oh, awesome.
of hardcore. And it was prior to listening to that show.
Wait, that wasn't what? That's not you. Is that University of New Hampshire or?
So I moved from Topsom to Southern Maine, and which was we lost our house, and then we were like kind of bouncing around apartments down there, which was awful. But the one incredible thing as like a young person into hardcore with very little access, I couldn't even get to shows very much. I had to beg my dad to drive me because I wasn't even old enough to have friends with licenses. So most of my engagement with hardcore was like ordering, going to a record store or ordering from Very Distribution catalog.
Yeah. Me and Joe Hardcore, I was on his podcast and we talked for a good 10 minutes about how awesome the Very catalog was.
Incredible. I had like a whole system of like highlighters where like one I'm the most interested. The next one was like, yeah, maybe if I come across a lot of money,
like, dude, I thought when I saw a Voice of Reason ad in the Very catalog, I thought we were fucking had made it. Like you have no idea. Like, well, you did because you could relate, but kids nowadays would be like, what? Like, I just thought that was like, I was like, holy shit, we're fucking big, like.
Yeah. So then I moved to Southern Maine and I'm in a new town. I don't fucking know anybody, but I'm going through my radio and then I had to hold the antenna, which is so hilarious. Again, this like makes me sound ancient. I had to hold the antenna and I found this hardcore radio show. So I'd hold the antenna with one hand and I'd have a pen and a paper with the other. And I would like write down all the bands and try to match them up to the songs and, order stuff that way. But prior to that radio show, I was mostly hearing like, I was super into old New York hardcore, like Breakdown and Gorilla Biscuits and Warzone and stuff like that. And because that was what I was into, I would just keep finding more and more of that through the thank you lists and the ways that we all got into hardcore back then. So I knew bands that came to Maine and old New York hardcore, but I didn't really have like my finger on the pulse of the times, because there was no way to back then.
Right. No, it was impossible, dude. There was no way.
So then the radio show started playing like modern hardcore. That's when I was starting to hear a lot of metalcore and all the bands I had never heard before. And I was like, oh my God. It was like blew my world open. So then listening to this tape, I was getting real nostalgic and I was like, oh, I used to call in a request. They took requests and they used to call it Davin's Tough Guy Request of the Week.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was the kind of hardcore I like. And I called and I'd be like, yo, can you play 25 to Life, Keeping It Real from Davin in Maine? Thanks.
Oh, that's great.
So I was like, God, I miss that. Like it was a way to engage with hardcore at a time when I couldn't engage with hardcore, like physically. So then I was like, wait a second. We're kind of doing the same thing, in the pandemic. Like I want to engage with hardcore. We can't engage with hardcore. There's so many bands out. And especially I know a lot of people, you hear like a handful of bands and you're like, okay, I don't have the mental energy to keep going through all this crap to find something I like. And I was like, wait, we're kind of in the same predicament. Somebody should do a radio show. I should do a radio show.
Yeah, I love that you stepped up. Like I said, when I first saw you promote that and I was like, fuck, why did no one think? Because like, it's almost like, dude, like you're saying, it's so hard to get exposed to a lot of shit. But if you follow someone like like someone like yourself, who's in the scene that I'm like, okay, I like, the music that you're doing and you're getting behind, then you put a show behind that. It's like, it's much easier to digest that than like me going through like 30,000 band camps on my phone or something that don't play right. You know what I mean? So it's like I said, I thought that was so cool. When I saw you do that, I wanted to ask Dav, like, how did you go about picking the bands for the first episode? Was that something that were you like, I want to do this, or did you cast a net and say, hey, send me shit? Or was it like a combination of both?
No, not okay, let me think about the first one. The first one, I did hit up a couple people. So I did it all really fast. Like I listened to that tape. I was like, yeah, someone should do this. Wait, I'm someone. I could do this. It's like, I basically like when you're in hardcore long enough and involved, you become like this kind of like useless encyclopedia of hardcore knowledge. And I feel like
totally
what's good from what's bad, what's legit from what's not, like just from being around, you kind of like know what's up. So I was like, yeah, I actually think I'm kind of good for this. So I hop on my bike, I literally rode my bike to Best Buy the next day, and I was like, and microphone. Okay. And now I'm going to do this. And then the next day I recorded, but, I was like, I had so many things. I'm constantly punishing my friends, like, yo, you got to check this out. You got to check. Oh my God, now I can punish everyone. This is great. So I had a very specific idea, which was like, I think what was so great about the community and college hardcore radio shows of yesteryear, they existed in the 80s, all through the 90s. They probably still exist. Was that they were like, they don't privilege any one genre. They don't,
Totally.
it's not just the hypest labels. It's like, whatever, it's everything. So I was like, I want to make sure that I'm playing all different subgenres, even ones I'm not the biggest fan of. But I can recognize what's good in that subgenre. I may not listen to myself. And then,
you, for somebody, just an outside listener, like, do you mostly try to keep it like an indie band? If they wanted to submit something, would you be open to that? Or do you try to, like, when you get submissions, you're like, oh, this is cool, but it maybe wouldn't fit into what I'm trying to do?
I feel like it's always within hardcore, and then you can kind of branch it under that umbrella. I haven't really got an outside submission. Sometimes I get punk where it's not hardcore punk, it's punk.
Mm-hmm.
And I just hope, I listen to everything, but I really don't have space to even play that much. I only play about 12 to 15 bands an episode.
That's just cool that you could even curate, like you were saying, because there is just so much stuff that comes out that sometimes it's hard to curate quality stuff, that it is cool that you can find that much stuff to put out.
And it's balance every episode between different subgenres. I try to represent a little of everything. I try to represent across the country and not just like a few big cities in the US. And I always have at least 2 bands from other countries to try to highlight their scenes as well.
Yeah, so that's super sick. And like, again, that was one of the things that I thought was cool about what you were doing, because there are so many shows that, like you said, they do, and listen, I'm guilty of it too. You kind of stay on that upper peak of stuff. And one of the things I like about your shows is, again, dude, like, I would say most of the time I've never heard of any of the bands that I listen to on your thing. And that's exciting to me, because I like that. Like, I love when I go into something and I'm like, wait, what was that? And I got to look, at the track list and go, oh, that's fucking awesome. Because again, a lot of times it's like you're being exposed to sort of the bigger stuff that I'm like, I'm already following that, so I know about it. I want to know about that sort of that next thing that's coming, or like, to your point, that lower, that sort of that new stuff that's coming out.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I try to keep up on everything in hardcore, but I miss so much. So the show really gave me an opportunity to be like, now I have a reason to be tedious and listen to every demo ever.
Yeah, that's super sick. And so how often are you doing episodes for our listeners, so they can start getting involved?
So in the beginning I was doing them every 2 weeks. I started graduate school when I moved. I live in New York City now. So I moved here to start grad school, and it is hard. And I was
gonna say, dude, I always see you doing some crazy studying that I'm like, yo, how the fuck are you alive? Because like I said, I'm like barely finished high school, so I can't imagine going back to do things like that. So I admire you for doing that, but dude, the schedule just, it definitely seems crazy sometimes.
That is insane. Like, I mean, I kind of knew what I was getting myself into, but it's like, you never know until you're really doing it, where I'm like, I have to read 200-300-page books.
Well, shout out to you for doing it, Davin, especially like you said, dude, later in life, it is harder, for people our age. You get comfortable and you're like, yeah, do I need to do this? And I think it's fucking awesome that you're doing it. It's super inspiring.
Thank you. It's fun. But yeah, so I've been trying, there was like a whole year I barely got an episode out. Now I'm trying to do it every month, 1 per month. I have slacked the last month because I was in finals, and I was like, okay, I can't. I'm like, I haven't done laundry in like almost 2 months. I can't do anything.
Well, and dude, it's so hard to do like I mean, again, this is why I started the digest, because it was like, me and Isaac we were like, all right, if we could do one, obviously when you start, you're like, we're gonna do one every 2 weeks, whatever. Then it was like, wow, if we can get one a month, then we'd go like these big gaps. So the one thing I've been trying to do religiously is like get these digest ones out like every week, and we've been doing really good. So yeah, I think a lot of times it's so hard to do this, and so I just knowing my process, I can imagine how much it goes into what you've got to like curate all these fucking songs, load it up, edit it, and then, like I said, at the same time you're reading like a fucking 600-page book for whatever, and it's awesome, dude. It is really cool to see you doing this.
I do try to provide context for every band as well, because that's something I loved about the radio show that I grew up on, was like where they're from, what their deal is, what label they're on, what past bands, the upcoming shit. Because I also feel like right now we get like a lot of playlists thrown at us. But when I hear that, I'm like, okay, who are they though? Like, where are they from? Are they? And I also think that right now with the access to hardcore, like you've talked about, where kids can kind of hear a sound, they've got access to ways to record, it's easy to replicate the sound of hardcore. And there are a lot of bands I can hear and be like, oh my God, this is so sick. But you got to dig in a little deeper and be like, oh, these people aren't actually like part of the scene. You can tell, I don't mean to sound, but like.
No, dude, I trust me, I fully understand what you're saying.
Like you need to have an engagement and be part of your local hardcore scene to be a hardcore band to me. It's not just, replicate the sound. So I do go into each band and like, I'll even reach out to people in their areas like, yo, you know about this band? What's their deal? To make sure it's like legit,
Well, yeah. And you don't want to, like you said, there's, let me try to say this in a nice way. There's a lot of things we don't know about people, right? So you don't want to put shine on somebody that maybe doesn't deserve it or isn't a good person just because the music's good, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
So I'll leave it at that. Davin, before I let you go, I want to ask you about your love of French fries. Tell me about this.
Yeah, French fries are my favorite food. They have been all my life. I found it.
You have a separate Instagram account do you want to let the listeners in on that one?
Oh, it's called, wait, what is it even called? Fry Boss?
Yeah, or something. Yeah, I'll plug it in the thing. But Davin is a huge French fry person.
Yeah, somebody was like, you should do reviews, and I was like, I can't. Review would be like, they're great. I've never met a fry I don't like. But yeah, even when I was like 7, I had a journal where I wrote like, all I want is French fries. And I was like, it's been my whole life. I eat them almost every day, like every day.
What's your preferred cut?
I like not a shoestring, but not a thick cut. And my favorite is from a Chinese restaurant, like especially the ones with like the bulletproof glass or like the takeout only.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, and I know the fry you're talking. It's like that. It's not quite a steak. It's like almost like it's not a steak fry. That's my favorite fry. And I know that's the least popular for some people.
Yeah.
But I know what you're talking about. The French fries around here, when you go to a Chinese restaurant, are mostly like a crinkle cut. So I don't know if you would back that, but that's awesome.
Chinese
Deb, before I let you go, let me grab a couple things from you. Plug Marked for Life. How can people get in touch with you there? How do we submit music to you? Give us the whole thing, because I want our listeners to go and be exposed to all the cool bands that you're showing. And like I said, I want them to get behind the show. I think it's a cool idea.
Thank you. Yeah, if you want to hear Marked for Life, it's streaming on anywhere you stream your podcasts. You can also follow Marked for Life HC on Instagram. That's the only social media. And I also take requests there.
Okay, cool. So if a band wants to send you something, there's not an email address, just send a message through through Instagram.
To send me a band, it's better to email it. And that's lifehc@gmail.com.
Okay, sick. So yeah, that's pretty much a wrap. Davin, I really want to thank you so much for giving me a bunch of your time and talking about your bands and everything going on. Thank you for bearing with me with the technical difficulties. So yeah, shout out to everybody who has been following the show and checking it out. Everybody make sure you give Davin's radio show a follow. Yeah, stay tuned for more episodes. Me and Isaac will be back, I think next week, for a proper Diablos Den episode where we'll recap his adventures at Milwaukee Metal Fest. So Davin, thank you again so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. I will talk to everybody soon. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Really quick, Davin wanted to mention, and I was going to ask you this. You have a new band.
Yes, I have a new band called 11th Hour.
Oh, sick.
Me and one of my friends from Philly, Travis, putting it together, and we're playing our first show in August here in New York. I can't announce it yet because it hasn't been announced. Have you recording anything yet or not yet? No, I think we're going to record maybe in 3 weeks. We'll have a demo.
Okay, sick.
Just be on the lookout for that.
Dude, definitely keep us in. Definitely let me or Yvonne know about the New York show. We would definitely be out there to support you for that. I think that's fucking awesome. And yeah, once you get some music, send it over. We'll definitely be happy to debut it here. After you debut it on your show first. But yeah, once again, Davin, thank you so much for your time sharing all of these stories. Like I said, I hope you have a book in you to talk about the Russia thing and everything else. And yeah, that's it. Peace, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks.